Well, as CL was telling you, my name is Kimberly West, and I am the CEO of Magnum Opus Consulting. We are a small consulting firm that we specialize in SharePoint and Office, or now Microsoft 365 migrations and training. And in fact, I think I'm going to niche that down just a little bit for 2021, and we will probably focus on governance and training because they are two underserved areas. I'm also an internet marketer, and CL wanted me to mention that I split my time between Atlanta, Georgia, and Playa del Carmen, Mexico, where we have a house. So whenever I feel like getting away from the States, I just roll down to Mexico and get some work done. I have been working with SharePoint quite literally since Microsoft rolled it out. I was one of the first people in the world to work with Microsoft as a consumer back in 2001 when it was part of the small business server. So I have a lot of history with SharePoint, have been specializing in it, and then eventually BPOS, and then Office 365, and now Microsoft 365. So I've been working on this stack probably, now we're almost at 20 years. So I've seen the evolution of SharePoint. I've seen the evolution of Microsoft's software as a service offerings, starting from BPOS, where there were lots and lots of bugs, and BPOS actually stands for the Business Productivity Online Suite. And that was the precursor to Office 365. And now Office 365 has morphed into Microsoft 365. So it's been a very interesting 20 years or so watching the evolution of all these products. Excuse me. In total, I have participated in the last 19 years, I've participated in over 100 migrations. I have had almost every role in this ecosystem, from an analyst to a project manager. I've been a developer, I've been a SME, I've been an architect. I've been the end user, I've been the trainer, I've been the content manager. So I have probably fulfilled every role that you could possibly fulfill within SharePoint and Microsoft 365. Now, the title of this talk for today is how to keep, let me make sure I have it, Adventures in Microsoft 365 Migrations from Project Management to User Adoption, how to keep your migration from becoming Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. Now, two things. If you've ever participated in a migration, you know that it can roll off the rails rather quickly. So let me give you some context here. Mr. Toad's Wild Ride used to be a ride at Disney World in Kissimmee or Orlando, Florida. And Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, it was where you would sit in a car and you would basically go through Mr. Toad's mansion. Mr. Toad was, a fictional character that Disney had. But the thing about Mr. Toad's Wild Ride and why it was called the Wild Ride is that your car would be coming, going straight, you're just bopping along, you're listening to the Disney music in the background, everything is just lots of fun. And you're like, oh, wow, we're getting ready to go through this door, and we're going to take this car, we're going to go through this door, and we're going to see what's on the other side. Well, Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, you're just bopping along, you're about to approach this door, and as soon as it looks like you're about to approach this door and you open it so you can see on the other side, Mr. Toad's Wild Ride would literally jerk you into a completely different direction, going down a completely different path at absolutely breakneck speed. And then the brakes would come on really suddenly. You're almost like leaning out of the chair, and then it would go through a different door. So if you've had any experiences with migrations, particularly SharePoint and Office 365 migrations, you know that that can be a very accurate description of what migrations look like. You get to a point, you think you're all good, and then all of a sudden, the bottom falls out, you just, CL said he wish he would bring Mr. Toad's Ride back. I actually wish they would too, but it was replaced by It's a Small World After All, or something like that. Anyway, so today we are going to talk about how to try and avoid some of these knee-jerk and some of these crazy things that happen within a migration. We're going to talk about some of the things that actually happen in the migration. So we'll cover project management, we'll talk about communication, we'll talk about some things that I call sand traps. These are the things that are not so obvious, but they can absolutely wreck your migration. We'll do a little talking about training, and then we'll wrap it up with user adoption and governance. How does that sound to everybody? You can either unmute yourself or go ahead and put in a comment.
Sounds great.
All right, cool. So let's start with project management. Most of the time I have seen a lot, well, I have seen a lot of migrations that have happened without a project manager. First of all, let me tell you that that's not a good idea. You need a project manager, or at least an analyst, someone that is going to oversee the different actions that need to take place during a migration, because there are so many different facets and so many things that the exchange team has to do, and that the AD team has to do, that the security team has to do. Someone needs to be able to corral all of these people and all of these different things that need to happen, and they need to be in one place. So I've seen project managers, project management run where Microsoft 365 is an entire project unto itself, so that that project manager has the purview and overview of all the things that are going on in that particular project. But then I've also seen migrations where each app is considered a separate project, and then those projects roll up to a program manager or a program director. Now, either way is absolutely fine. It really depends on your organization and how it is set up. Because you're talking about change management, you're talking about change management boards, a whole bunch of different things go into your project management. And I mentioned change management because there's always a lot of changes in a migration. So either way is absolutely fine. Using waterfall versus agile, personally, I prefer an agile methodology when it comes to managing a project, whether it's Microsoft 365 migration as an entire project or each app is a separate project. I do prefer agile over waterfall. However, depending on the size of your environment, and I think the largest environment I ever worked with was about 35,000 users across 22 countries. So that's pretty large and obviously pretty wide. We used waterfall for that because we needed to make sure that we had checks and balances in place, and that activity A completed before activity B was taken on. So in that case, we used a waterfall methodology, but agile is absolutely more than adequate as well. So someone said, oh, wow, what was the wow about? Yeah, 35 users across 20 some odd countries, it's a lot of people and it's very wide. And that was actually one of the smoother migrations that I had been involved with, because the management, the upper management, allowed the experts to do what they're experts in. They allowed us to put together the governance. They allowed us to put together the project plans. They allowed us to basically flow everything out so that the project did run very smoothly. Any questions so far? I'll take that as a no.
Well, I just have a little comment. I'm sorry.
Sure.
So I'm part of a larger organization. Obviously, my agency is worldwide and all that stuff. But I have a small agency. Well, not small agency, but I am in an agency. And we are dependent on whatever the overlords decide.
Exactly.
And they already open up the instance for all of us, and they say go ahead and use them. There has not been any governance, any guidance, any directions. Everybody has the ability to create teams and AD groups, and everybody's like, yay! And I'm the SME for a 500 team agency. So if you can help me with your conversation about governance and real, this is where I am right now. It's like, yay, we have them 365. Now
yeah, it's like the euphoria of having the tool. Woo, yay, we've got it. Open it up to everybody. You know what? It's going to take one good time for you guys to get hacked, and then reality sets in.
So the one question I have, this is what I need to find out, is every time somebody creates an AD group, are we getting charged for that? And, with the AD group comes an inbox, drive, all other objects. Are we getting charged for that as well? So I am on an expeditory trip on that.
Okay. The short answer to that is no, but it also, we would have to talk about how your Azure is set up.
Azure, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay. So let's take a look at communication. I always like to ask, is this thing on? How do we craft a communication plan that reaches everyone from the CEO to the administrative staff? Now, communication, unfortunately, is one of the overlooked areas because, you know, IT team figures, okay, we've got this new thing, we're going to put it in. We only need to tell everybody that it's here, and we don't need to do a lot of communication. So yeah, IT people, we're notoriously bad at communication. It's not an indictment of us or our skills. It's just that, let's face it, that's not our ball of wax. That's not our wheelhouse. So I suggest that you leverage the communications or corporate communications team if you have one. If not, when you are doing the migrations, Microsoft has a particular portion of their site that's available to you, where it literally has written the communications emails that you need to send out to your people to let you know that Microsoft 365 is coming. So you don't have to author it. The graphics are already there. In fact, what I'll do is I'll provide the link to CL and he can give it to everyone in the group. So the communications have already been done for you. You can just go in, grab these emails, grab these templates, make the tweaks to the communications emails that you need to, and get ready to send those out to your end user team, your end users. I also recommend communicating clearly and often. Don't feel that you're going to be overkill if you're sending 1 or 2 emails every week or every other week to your end user community, because a huge change is coming. And psychologically, you know, people are already adverse to change. So communicating that the change is coming and communicating what those changes are is absolutely necessary. Sometimes you may get a chance, a situation there. Thank you very much, CL. You got the emails. You may have a situation where your upper management does not think that you need to communicate, but you do, because there are significant differences in the applications that you are going to roll out as part of Microsoft 365 than your end users are accustomed to.
And limitations.
I'm sorry?
And limitations.
Exactly, and limitations. I appreciate that. Exactly. So your end users, you need to prep your end users for what is coming. And those emails that you does, in fact, CL just put the link in the chat. Those emails start to spell out those changes and those limitations. And it also links them back to videos on Microsoft's site where people can start to understand better what they're going to get into. I also suggest that your IT team or your migration team take a look at those videos as well, because on the technical side, we already understand and know what's going to be changing. But how is it going to change for the end user? So as the IT team, you're wearing both hats. You're the IT team, you're responsible for rolling this out, but you're also going to be using this as an end user. So the better familiarization you have yourself with the tools, with the changes, with the limitations, with you know, GUI differences, how the thing is laid out, different shortcuts and different short keys, the more familiar you are with that as an IT person, the more effective you can be within your organization. Also, I strongly suggest you get power users within your organization and bring them up to speed. One of the ways to really speed user adoption of Microsoft 365 is to get the buy-in of the end users. You can get the buy-in of your stakeholders and your IT team, but if you have people almost seated throughout your organization that can help people when they get stuck, or that are singing the praises of Microsoft 365 and how great it is, et cetera, it goes a long, long way towards user adoption and the speed of user adoption. What you don't want is people what you do not want are people who are going to be in the organization who are going to badmouth it. Again, this is a huge, and I hate to use this word, but I'm going to use it. This is a huge paradigm shift, not only operationally, but visually, productivity, everything. Huge paradigm shift. And you don't want any negativity around this paradigm shift because it also has a lot of impact on employee morale. Another tool that we like to use are lunch and learns. Periodically, maybe once a month or once every 6 weeks when you're far out from delivering Microsoft 365, start to have lunch and learns where people can ask questions. People are a little fearful of change. They're resistant of change. The more present you or your project manager or even your executive management, the more present you are, the better it's going to go for you and the much smoother it's going to go. And the last thing is please, please, please make sure you communicate with your service desk or your help desk. This actually goes into sand traps, but one of the biggest problems I've seen is where organizations fail to let their service desk or their help desk know what their IT migration team is doing. And therefore there's this, no communication between the two. So when Microsoft 365 gets rolled out, the help desk or the service desk gets absolutely slammed with calls and they don't always know how to answer them. So when you're doing your communication, when you're doing your project management, please make sure that you keep your help desk or your service desk in the loop. In fact, include them in your meetings, in the larger meetings, and make sure that they have all the information they are going to need in order to make the rollout successful. I have been in a couple of situations where that did not happen. And Microsoft has been rolled out to a pilot group. Microsoft 365 has been rolled out to a pilot group. A couple of the people who are in the pilot group have issues and they are directed to call the service desk. Well, the service desk didn't know anything about the pilot. They didn't know anything about Microsoft 365. So they were woefully unprepared and the response to the end user really suffered. And so your internal customer service also suffers. So that's one of the sand traps. So we've moved from communications into sand traps. Let's talk about some other not so obvious technicals that you're going to face. One of the first, testing. I have been in so many, I can't begin to tell you how many environments where the IT department did not feel that testing Microsoft 365 was necessary. Now, in most organizations, you have legacy applications, you have third-party applications, you have all these other connectors that may be connecting to your SharePoint environment, maybe pulling data from different sources, etc. I mean, there's a whole litany of things that can happen, particularly with legacy applications. Before you do a full-fledged rollout, you need to test these operations. You need to test the legacy applications. You need to test the data connections. You need to test the workflows. Oh, that's a huge one. Workflows haven't been tested necessarily. You can get a pretty decent inventory of your current SharePoint environment and a couple of other environments with some third-party applications. ShareGate in particular has a great application. It's free, that you can go in and it will do an assessment and a catalog of your entire SharePoint environment. And I've used that. It's absolutely invaluable because it tells you what sites, what type of sites you have, what type of workflows you have, whether or not you have orphaned sites. You can even test and check for duplicate sites. So the tool is pretty comprehensive. And that is something that I absolutely recommend when you're doing your migration. Something else that sometimes gets overlooked, bandwidth. I had a client who was sitting, basically their bandwidth was a Comcast residential plan. And they wanted to roll out Office 365 and they were also expanding their office. Well, 23 people on a residential type connection absolutely kills your bandwidth. So we had all sorts of issues and I'm doing going through the migration. I'm like, why are we having these issues? Why are we having these timeout issues? And it dawned on me to check the bandwidth, or at least what kind of internet plan this particular business had. And that's when I found out that it was on a residential plan. So please, one of the things that you want to do is test your bandwidth, check your internet provider to make sure that you're going to have appropriate bandwidth for the number of people that you're going to have on site using Microsoft 365. Naming conventions, tenant naming, and global policies. what kind of global policies do you have in your organization? Are you denying the accessibility of video? Well, if so, then there are certain features within Office 365 that you're not going to be able to use. Are people banned from reaching outside sites? Well, then no one in your organization is going to be able to use Office 365. And these are very, very simple examples, but global policies are something that you absolutely must address and analyze when you're doing your Office 365 migration. And one of those things that sometimes gets left by the wayside. I've also seen a lot of organizations that want to change the name of their tenant. And it's after the fact, after they've migrated some content or had some native content put in there. And we all know as technical people that in order to rename your entire tenant, you have to stand up a brand new tenant. So making sure that the tenant has the proper name at the very beginning of your project sounds like a small thing, but it can become a major thing later on in your process. And I am going to pause for just a second for any questions or feedback or input. Okay.
I just want to tell about the ShareGate. ShareGate is like, I think they provide only 30 days free. After that, they charge, or the tool gets expired, it seems.
Yeah, they have a trial version, but they have a particular product. Give me 1 second and I will pull it up. That is free. And that's what allows us to get the site inventories. Let me grab that right now.
Can you share the link? I really want, actually it's on my to-do list to
okay, actually, I'm looking for it. As soon as I find it, I'll put the link in the chat. Absolutely.
Because I've been asked that recently, you know, have you worked with those tools? And I'm like, I gotta do some search online and download some free versions.
Or it's something that ends with some point. They put like Aqua Point or something. They recently rolled out that tool. You're talking about that?
Wait a second, here it is, SharePoint and migration. Here's the article, Explorer panel, and this was written by their MVP. Here we go. So this is the article that I'm going to post first, and then I will post the link to the tool.
Yeah, also, and if anyone is trying to migrate the Nintex workflows from SharePoint 13 to SharePoint Online, the ShareGate does a great job, but the thing is all actions of your on-premise are not compatible with online. Once the workflow is migrated, you have to review the workflow, and if any actions that are not compatible, you have to recreate those actions with available actions in SharePoint Online. I mean, Nintex Office 365 actions.
Mm-hmm.
That's very useful. Thanks, Krishna.
Yeah. And some of the articles also, I mean, if you Google in the Nintex community, they have provided actions that are migrates as is and that are not migrates. So that link, maybe if you find, that's really helpful article from Nintex community.
Yep, give me 1 second. Okay, I'm gonna make a note to find this because I want to continue and at least finish up the talk today, and I will make sure I find this link to the actual tool. Okay, it's in my notes. Let us move on to, let's see, training. Now, I'm curious, how many of you are responsible or partially responsible for training end users in your environment? Okay, so Tina is. Anyone else?
I am too.
Okay. Training is probably the second most overlooked portion of Microsoft 365 migration. And we're talking about training over and above the videos that are available from Microsoft. So again, you can go to Microsoft and you can actually download some of the videos and provide links to your end users. in those videos so that they can get trained on the basic features and functionalities of Microsoft 365. Everything from the Office Productivity Suite all the way up through Power BI and the Power Apps. And if you look in some of the developer forums, you can also find some pretty advanced training on Microsoft's site for those elements. Now, what happens is that each organization is different, and they're going to be different in your environments. They're going to be different in branding. They're going to be differences in security. So there may come a need for training that is specific to your organization. So don't reinvent the wheel. Take the screenshots and the information that's available from Microsoft and simply tailor it to your organization. That's one of the ways that we create training material that is specific to an organization very, very quickly. It's just the same information that is already online, that's already being provided. But when you have screenshots that are branded with your particular company, the training seems, excuse me, the training seems to go a lot further and be a lot more acclimated towards the environment or the audience that you're trying to go after. Is training necessary? Absolutely. Again, there are changes, there are differences in the way applications in Microsoft 365 work versus how they worked previously. Plus, there are a lot of new applications that your end users are going to use. And since Teams seems to be the darling of Microsoft, Teams was rolled out basically as an answer to COVID for a lot of organizations. It is the fastest growing application in Microsoft's history. But with that rollout of to the organizations, there wasn't a lot of training. People were just said, here's Teams and, you know, figure it out. Just go ahead and work with it. So therefore, the trainings that were available on Microsoft's website were very beneficial to a lot of companies because they did not have the time, the budget, or the personnel to roll out a specific training for their organizations. Now with training, that also assumes user adoption and governance. And I always tell people just because you build it does not mean that they will come and use it. Adoption is the absolutely most overlooked area in a Microsoft 365 environment or engagement or migration. No matter how you put it, it's the most overlooked. And a lot of people don't understand what governance is. They think it's just a set of rules and regulations that are put around your environment. And that's partially true, but it is the responsibility of the entire company to keep a governance plan and process in place. So everyone from your security team all the way down to your corporate communications and your graphics team are responsible for governance. We're putting the guardrails around what can be done and why it can be done and by whom it can be done within Microsoft 365. So Tina, one of the things that you mentioned was that you guys have your environment is wide open. Anyone can create teams, anyone can do what they need to do. It's just kind of like the wild, wild west, and that's what we kind of call it. Well, the whole point of governance is to keep your environment from becoming the wild, wild west, which is what we had in SharePoint, which is one of the reasons why people are moving into Microsoft 365 to begin with. Oh, we want to get away from all of the duplication and all the craziness that was going on in SharePoint. Well, you're bringing the exact same process from your old SharePoint, possibly on-prem, into your online version. And what do we say, what's the definition of insanity? Is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different outcome. So it is difficult sometimes, very often in fact, it's difficult to get upper management to understand and to buy in into the idea of governance. For this, that's when I go on Microsoft's website and I pull the best practice. I pull the white papers. And you know, since I've had the experience I'm able to regale people with stories about what happens when you do not put governance in place. Another source of information that I have used heavily is the SharePoint Maven, his website. In fact, let me pull it up and I'll put the link in the group.
Gregory?
Yeah. Greg has a really good couple of blogs on governance and why it's needed. And I've used these to rely on more than one time, been able to bring them to upper management, particularly upper management when they don't understand the technology that they're about to put in. They're putting in the 500-pound gorilla, but they're treating it like the 10-pound chihuahua.
I always tell them this is not a very sexy subject, but it's gonna save us a lot of headaches.
Yes.
You know,
It will
nobody
save-
thinks governance is sexy. I think governance is sexy.
Yeah, governance is sexy because it's the thing that keeps you from having to make a midnight call to your CIO. That's what's sexy about governance. From security, making sure that certain sites are locked down, certain activities are locked down, certain abilities are locked down. Not everyone in an organization should be able to create a team site. Not everyone in an organization should be able to create a SharePoint site collection or a SharePoint site or even a sub-site. Your governance will also help you prevent duplicate of information. It gives you a point of reference for a naming convention, particularly when, you know, if I worked with a company, we had over 200 site collections. And we had to there was no naming convention at all. So, you know, names of site collections got to be too long. They weren't congruent with what we were trying to do in IT. People couldn't find information. So it was a whole big mess. So making sure that, you know, governance contains, even all the way down to your naming convention is also something that you want to take a look at. However, at the end of the day, we all know that we're going to be faced with an environment at some point in our lives where the upper management just says simply, no, we're not going to do anything about governance. And I'll be honest with you, I have a client exactly like that right now. So what we're doing, instead of trying to hit them with a huge all over governance plan, one of the things that we've done is we've taken it now and we've broken it down into bite-sized chunks. And when you're able to take, okay, well, if everyone in your organization can create teams, if they do this, then this is what happens. This is what can happen. If you've decided that you want to be able to invite external resources into a Teams meeting or into your Microsoft Teams, these are the risks that you run. So what I have found is that trying to hit people over the head with an overall governance policy and overall governance processes is overwhelming to them because they're not understanding the if-then. They're not understanding the conditional relationship of what happens when you allow your SharePoint sites to be accessed by outside entities. They don't understand what the ramifications are if, you know, you turn on anonymous access and you just allow anonymous access to your environment. So educating your management team, educating the CIO, educating people on what can happen if you don't do X, or if you do X, is how we have been able to get around, and for years, how I've been able to get around people creating a formal governance policy. And when you do it that way, you're actually sneaking in a governance policy, because if that becomes the policy, then that's a piece of guardrail right there, just for Microsoft Teams and external access. And then you take another topic and you wrap that up really pretty with the bow and you give it to them. So you actually are creating a governance policy, but they don't know it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Kimberly, I think governance in 365 is even that much more important than on-prem, because, you know, you talk about the wild, wild west in SharePoint, proliferation of sites. Whenever you create a Teams, it creates a team site as well.
Exactly.
And, you know, it creates a group as well. You know, Tina talked about Active Directory groups. Well, now you got this concept of a Teams group as well. So the proliferation is, you know, extremely magnified with 365. And I was just curious on your thoughts of how to reconcile the worlds of, on premise, we had, HR team sites, we had, finance team sites, and then their subsites underneath. Well, now, we're going to create teams for HR, and then they're going to have, team sites for HR and finance. How do we reconcile the, like US Postal? I'm sure they have on-prem and they have 365 simultaneously hybridized. How do you reconcile those two worlds of coexisting together and prevent proliferation?
One of the things that we've been doing, what we're and seeing, is the use of Microsoft Teams. So I will reference Microsoft Teams as opposed to a team site, and that way we'll have the nomenclature together. But where previously in a SharePoint on-prem, we would have the HR site collection, and under HR, you may have benefits, you may have payroll, you may have this department, that department, etc. And each one of those would be subsites. What we're seeing is the move into Microsoft Teams, and in each one of those departments actually becoming channels within the team. So the security on that is a little tighter. But again, if you have your environment, the environment enabled so that Microsoft Teams is open to the world, then you do run the risk of sensitive data possibly leaking. And one of the other things that we see a lot now are issues around OneDrive, because no one is telling upper management that OneDrive can also, you can also share files out of your OneDrive outside of your organization. And the security team may not have gone in to flip the switch to turn that off. So that's another area that we're seeing, OneDrive and Microsoft Teams. We're seeing a lot of movement of documents to those two applications, and we're also seeing the issues around those two applications. So that's what we're seeing in a hybridized environment, is that Microsoft Teams is really overtaking the SharePoint environments.
Well, what do you think about, and I'm actually, as a project, I'm running it and I'm doing it for all my clients right now.
Mm-hmm.
I'll explain to them what it does later, but first I'm installing it. And that's the home app, the SharePoint, sort of SharePoint home app in Teams. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. So Microsoft released, if I knew how to share the screen, I would have shared my screen here with you. Mm-hmm. But Microsoft created this called Teams app. I'm going to share a link in a second. Okay. So basically, your SharePoint homepage,
right?
It's still missing the navigation, but which is really useful. But let's say you have a sales team. I put that navigation, the whole page, as the landing page.
Oh, okay, for the Microsoft Teams?
Yes, and it comes, and then you can sort of navigate. The links are different. You have to work around the links, but you can essentially use your intranet inside Microsoft Teams.
Yes. Well, the whole back end of Microsoft Teams is SharePoint.
Yes.
With the exception of the calendar feature. But you're right. You can absolutely expose the homepage of the SharePoint site within the Microsoft Teams site.
And that's starting to look very cool. I have a lot of construction companies, mm-hmm. and I'm trying to get them, because now they can from their phone navigate. Although it works in Teams, doesn't work from the phone app as well. It works for one client, but I haven't figured out why it doesn't work for others.
Oh wow! Have you lodged that as an issue with the product team at Microsoft? Because that would be an interesting one for them to research.
I haven't launched it as an issue because I want to troubleshoot by myself first. Okay. I don't. It's just that there's very little information out there about it and setting it up to begin with. So
Albert, you can be the trailblazer and on your way to MVP status if you actually figured that out and published it.
Well, there you go.
There you go. Exactly. But if there's not a lot of information on it, you'll be the one to put it there.
Well, I've seen a couple of videos already that took me through the whole thing and using the App Studio, which is a whole cool new feature. And I've seen already people offering courses like $1,000 per person just to teach you how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a little bit behind on that. People are already capitalizing on the, and it literally just came out, and there's already somebody just figured it out, and they're charging $1,000 to.
Because knowledge is a commodity, particularly in this space, because people like us, there's a shortage worldwide of people who are knowledgeable about Office 365 or Microsoft 365 and know how to make it work. That's just a fact of life.
It keeps changing so quickly.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the problem. It changes so quickly. I mean, I think the certification exam for Teams, for Microsoft Teams, was just updated in July. Well, Teams, and the reason that they updated it in July, they didn't plan to. They updated it in July because so many people were rolling it out. So you're right. We used to say every 90 days. Now it's about every 30 to 60 days you have to learn something new. So you need to make sure that you're on the product roadmap for Microsoft. Check that at least once a week.
Yeah. The owner of my company wanted us to template the SharePoint sites or homepages that we created and roll out to every client. And I had to tell them a couple of weeks ago, you know what, that concept is dead.
Yeah, that's
everything move. And if you read what Microsoft wants you to do is basically move to Teams.
I was going to say, if you can figure out an app or some way of manipulating Teams that's proprietary, package it and sell it on the open market. You've seen that there are thousands of applications now available for Teams. A year ago, barely anybody had heard about Teams.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's growing every day, and it's global. There was one tool for timing. There's a bunch of young guys from Argentina. It's really interesting.
Exactly. And now even with Microsoft serving up their own applications within Teams, so and the advances that they're doing in Teams. So you've seen the new lists feature within Teams where you can expose a SharePoint list.
We started using it a couple of weeks ago, and we're moving heavily into it. It's just
absolutely.
Tina,
thank you so much. Also, please feel free to reach out to me with any questions, particularly about your project. I know you're kind of facing an uphill battle, but let me know if I can be of any assistance to you at all. I thank all of you for coming, but we can continue the discussion until we've got 4 minutes, because I think we all have a hard stop at 1. But I know we had an hour to cover what we covered, and it was just at 100,000 feet. But if you'd like to continue some conversations and get deeper into some of the issues that you're having with Microsoft 365, I'm very easy to find on LinkedIn and on SharePoint. I'm always on SharePoint, but I'm easy to find on LinkedIn and also on Facebook. I go by Ms. Kim's World or Kimberly West. You can always find me because I'm the Kimberly West that's got the dreads or the locks.
I'm sharing the link from Microsoft.
Okay, you got it. Thank you. Thank you so much, Tina. Thank you, Albert. I appreciate you for sharing that link. But yes, make sure that you're on the product roadmap all the time, and you will see all of the new stuff coming out. And I will be writing more and more these days on the new features and things that are coming out from Microsoft, not just on Teams, but also on Microsoft 365. And Albert, yeah, I really think you should consider taking that knowledge, packaging it, and turning it into a revenue stream. I see money everywhere, so. Well, everyone, are there any other questions? Okay, I'll take that as a no. I thank all of you for taking your time out of your lunch, out of your busy days to attend today's How to Keep Your Microsoft 365 Migration from Becoming Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. Again, if you'd like to dive deeper into any of the topics that we touched on briefly today, I am Ms. Kim's World on almost all social media, and you can also find me on LinkedIn. And thank you so much. CL, you there? Or did you go to your... Okay, so Dupraj, thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much, Kimberly. I've shared your LinkedIn profile link once more with the group. Really appreciate the wealth of information. And yeah, we encourage everyone to reach out to Kimberly, shoot her a connection invite or a recommendation should you have any questions or want to network. And yeah, really appreciate Kim, and hope you enjoy. I'm not sure if you're in Atlanta or Mexico, but enjoy your weather out there. And I'm sure it's nice and warm, warmer than here in DC. So.
Oh yeah, and I will find I know the ShareGate, I have my note, the ShareGate tool, the inventory tool, I will make sure I get that to CL so he can get it out to all of you.
Wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Kimberly, for sharing your valuable suggestions. Appreciate that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, I
And-
appreciate all of you, thank you.
Yeah. And would be great, like since Microsoft Teams is evolving like anything going forward, and a lot of applications we can embed in the Teams, would be great if you can give a brief discussion on this meetup about Microsoft Teams, like what is it, how can we use it, and what is the future of it. And
Oh,
what are the
absolutely.
applications. Yeah, that would be great.
Okay, I will take that under advisement. And was that Krishna? Was that you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's me.
I have something that I've written up, and I will get that to CL, or if you just connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'll make sure that that gets to you.
Okay, sure.
Because we're doing an
I will-
awful lot in Microsoft Teams, and you really need to be on the forefront of that, because that's going to be Microsoft's next category killer for at least the next 18 months.
Right. Recently, my organization started like embedding the Power Apps applications and Power BI reports as well within the Teams.
Yes.
So it's not something we can ignore. The Teams, initially it looks very kind of confusing thing with the Teams and the team sites and a lot of same product names with different features. But like going forward, it's like getting a clear vision how we can use the Teams.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think, Krishna, since you're on the cutting edge of the Power Apps, being able to connect Power Apps and Teams and make the magic that a lot of these corporate, and I use that term, make the magic that a lot of these corporate people are looking for, is going to put you at the forefront of the next wave, because that's what needs to happen next, is automation and data mining and data share. So you're right on time.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your afternoon, and connect with me, and I'll get those resources out to you.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Bye.